Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to the launch of Agri-Food Singapore Standards. My name is Sean Man from the Singapore Manufacturing Federation Standards Development Organization. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. So for the program outline, we'll be hearing from 4 esteemed speakers, followed by a quick polling session, and end with a panel discussion. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Allan Lim, Chairman of the Singapore Food Standards Committee. Dr. Allan Lim, please.
Hello. Thank you, Chairman. Distinguished speakers, representatives from Enterprise Singapore, Singapore Food Agency, standards partners, ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to all of you to this launch event. Singapore food supply is vulnerable to the volatilities of the global food market, as we have experienced in the past few years. Disruptions to supply sources, transport routes, and environmental challenges such as climate change affects both food production and food availability, locally and worldwide. So to ensure Singapore's food security, the Singapore government has set a 30 by 30 goal to produce 30% of Singapore's nutritional needs by 2030 locally. So local farms play a very important role to achieve this objective, so that we can reduce the dependence on imports and build our own resilience and capabilities for robust food supply chain in the event of unforeseen disruptions. An encouraging development is that between 2019 to 2021, there was an increase in the number of local farms from 221 to 260. And for your information, the local agri-food sector is predominantly made up of farms producing eggs, which account for 30% of the food consumption, seafood, which accounts for 8%, and vegetables, which account for 4% of the Singapore total food consumption. And the total value of this food production increased by 13%, from 163 million to 185 million between 2020 to 2021. So in order to grow this sector further, in view of the number of farms and also the total volume of the produce, it is timely that the industry look at building the capabilities and improving farm management, which will improve the competitiveness, quality, and safety of the local produce. So I'm very proud that today we'll be launching 3 agri-food standards: the SS670 specification for good agriculture practice, SS675 specification for good agriculture practice, and SS676 specification for good animal husbandry practice for layer farms. These 3 agri-food standards, which are certifiable standards, aim to guide local farms in the area of food safety, quality, and environmental management, and the health and safety of the farm workers. So it's one of the very unique standards in the world. Through the adoption of best farming practices recommended by local industry experts and the alignment with international standards, these 3 local Singapore standards will allow local farms to access the wider markets and enhance consumers in their products and produce. I would like to thank the working groups and the industry partners for their tireless effort, commitment, and time given to develop these standards. This is not an easy task, given how these standards will serve the industry and, more importantly, set the bar for the farm management in Singapore. I would also like to thank our esteemed speakers and moderators who will be sharing with you the adoption of the standards today. They are Ms. Hoon from SFA, Mr. Allan Lim from Comcrop Pte Ltd, Malcolm Ong from the Fish Farmer Private Limited, and Mr. Yeap Ming from Choose Agriculture Private Limited, and last but not the least, Dr. Diana Chan, who co-chair the Technical Committee for Agri-Tech and Agri-Food Products. I thank you for joining us today and wish you a fruitful and enriching session ahead. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Allan. Our next speaker is Ms. Khoo. Ms. Khoo is the Director of Capability Development Department at the Singapore Food Agency, overseeing the development and promotion of agri-food and food standards. Ms. Khoo, please.
Hello, good afternoon to all. Welcome to our foreign delegates coming to Singapore and to this event. And welcome friends and partners from Singapore. Well, I'd like to share with you all on the scope and also the objectives of these 3 SS we call GAP standards that we have initiated in Singapore, and we have developed together with many stakeholders from the agri-food sector. Okay. So thanks to our chairman from Food Standard Committee. Okay, he has shared that we have developed the 3 standards with very unique numbers that you should remember. Okay, these are similar to a lot of global standards worldwide. Even our neighboring countries, we call good agricultural practice standards. Okay, the most famous one that started in year 2000 is actually known as EuroGAP and is now called Global GAP. So I think in this region, we have developed a lot of GAP standards in the ASEAN members country. So Singapore, we started our journey in 2000, and here we are today. We have actually kind of upgraded our standards to a Singapore standard that is very much aligned to a lot of global standards. Okay, so I'd like to share that we have 3 different standards we call good agriculture practice, but they are actually for different farming system, for different commodity. Okay, so we have one that is 670, which is applicable to the open cage pond farming, you know, the farming system for aquaculture sector, covering different aquaculture commodities. And we have another standards, which is SS675, that covers the outdoor and indoor vegetable farming system, applicable for growing vegetable, fruits and herbs for urban farming system. Next, we have 676, which is good agricultural practice standards. We call it a good animal husbandry practices, and that covers the layers farm, eggs farming in Singapore, because we have 4 big poultry layers farm. So the standards is catered for their needs. Okay, so do remember the SS670, 675 and 676, which you can actually purchase today as well as a hard copy to take away. Okay, the standards, the 3 specifications that we have developed actually covers from the farm production, starting from pre-productions and the production process, harvesting and post-harvest handling prior to delivery. Okay, that's the scope of the good agriculture practice. Yeah. And typically we call it specification for on-farm productions, and they are actually a set of farm management practices. Okay, it actually quite well known to be a quality assurance system for on-farm productions, and it details the best practices, okay, to prevent the occurrence of hazards that happens along the whole production line, right? What it actually addresses are hazards that pertain to food safeties, okay, and also possible occurrence of hazards, you know, when you're growing your crops, as well as any hazards that may actually came in through the environment, as well as in terms of worker safeties, any hazards that could happen. Okay, so those are the key areas or objectives we try to address through the adoption of this specification. Okay, so we actually set a requirement for the farm production to address these 4 objectives, right? So within the standards, we call it a specification. It covers the typical elements. If you look at the figures on your right? So those are the key elements that we cover within the GAP standards. Okay, it looks at setting requirement, best practices to address some of the hazards issue that may occur, in your site production area. Okay, so you have to actually put in measures to address some of these hazards. So you will need to, for instance, look at putting in place a risk management plan to address some of the hazards when you are selecting the site when you operate. Okay, so there's also requirement that specify how you manage the people, your workers, and also some of these quality management plan you need to put in. Okay, and there's also an element on looking at putting in place crop improvement, crop management, environment management. Okay, yeah. It looks at also your input purchase and your inputs applications, how you manage your equipments, how you maintain your devices, how you monitor the water conditions and things like that. Okay, another key important elements within the standards, there's a need to do documentation, have proper establishment of the SOPs and proper records so that your product or your production process is traceable. Okay, that's an element of having a robust traceability system to be put in place on your farm production, right? And then there's an element of audit that internally you have to establish an internal auditing team to audit your whole production process to make sure that you meet the requirement, your specification from your buyers as well, okay? And also whether your production system is consistent, is sound, technically sound, okay, and whether the product is safe. So you need to have an internal audit process as well, okay, besides establishing the team. There's also an element to look at the product itself. You must have a QC system in place, okay? You have to define your quality checks, what are the control points you need to put in place in that. Okay, again, then there's also the requirement to look at your deliveries, how you are going to deliver your product to make sure that you are a safe product. Okay, and then in terms of catered to the needs of the customers, I think nowadays you know that our customers are very demanding. They expect your product to be reliable, to be traceable. So you need to put in place a recall system, a traceable system in place. Okay, I hope it's not too small for you to look at it. So this is just a glimpse of how we structured the standard itself. Okay, this is a content page. Okay, how we actually categorize the requirement, the specification under the different topic within the standard itself. Right, if you want to purchase an e-copy, you can purchase from Singapore Standards e-shop. So I have a link for you to download and you can order directly. They can send the e-copy to you. Is copyrighted. If you do want to have a hard copy, you can purchase from the counter, behind the seats over there. Okay. Okay, now I'll talk about, why SFA initiated this standard development and we want the farms to actually adopt the standards, right? Firstly, I think we face a lot of challenges in Singapore when the farms operate, right? It's not just the climate change. I think there's a lot of other issues that we are facing. So we hope that a standards is valuable to the farm to address the challenges, but not just that, to create more opportunities for them. Right? Firstly, I think just now Allan mentioned that the standards actually helps to contribute to our 30 by 30 goals to ensure that we have a supply of safe food for Singapore. I will elaborate more later on how it is going to do that. Okay. Secondly, the standards itself will actually add values to the farms, okay, to the agri-farming sector. Okay, you know that our farms here, we adopt a lot of high techs, okay, but technology is not going to solve your problem alone. I think we heard from the summit too that farmers have to adopt best practices, good practices, so that you can optimize the value of technology, right? And even though you have very skillful farm workers, it does not mean that your workers can actually help you attain good productivity. You need to actually train them and guide them with a standard sets of good guidelines, best operation methods. Yeah. And then thirdly, well, how do we actually address the changing or increasing consumer needs for more reliable, more traceable and safer food, or even fresher food, right? So standards that we have developed actually have that objectives, right? And the last but not least is our SS Good Agriculture Practice helps us to, or even support us in cooperating regionally with our ASEAN members country in terms of harmonizing the agri-food standards within the region for a purpose. So I'll elaborate more in the subsequent slides. Okay, we hear a lot about Singapore food story because of the challenges we face in Singapore as we import 90% of food worldwide. There's a need for Singapore to look at increasing the local production base. We call it the 3 strategic basket, the 3 strategies that will help Singapore to secure our safe food supply. I will just focus on the very first strategy, grow local basket. Okay, you hear very much that our goals is to increase 30% of our nutritional needs by 2030. And by having that targets, right, and also our key contributor or stakeholders here in Singapore, our farms, we want to build their capabilities as well as capacity. So as SFA, we work with a lot of stakeholders, be it government agencies, the industries, associations, as well as academia. We hope that we have all these initiatives in place to make sure that our farms are able to produce more, as well as to be more sustainable in their business operation, right? So one of the key initiatives which is related to standards and certification like this, our objective is to make sure that such a standards is high value and is a very useful tools for farms to leverage on to build their business competitiveness, right? In terms of enhancing their product value, right? We hope that the farms can use the standards and certification to better brand their products such that they can have bigger market access to new markets as well as to expand their current markets, right? That's under one of the initiatives that we have put in place. And of course, we hope that, the standards can also bring greater values and realize our economic vision to be a regional or global hub in agri-food tech, right? And the standards that we have created, it has to bring value to the industry. As I mentioned, our industry or our farms actually adopt a lot of high-tech solutions. And such a best practice and standards that we have specified in the standards will have to be technically sound and environmentally sound and socially sound. Okay, the intention of all these specification and requirement that we have set in the standards actually ensures that the farms can operate effectively, okay, and they are able to produce a consistent product and they are more resilient. Okay, because if you look at it, if you don't operate based on the protocol, your workers will be just following by their own guidelines. Yeah, then you have a chaotic situation where your products are not consistent, right? So that's very important. And also through the specification, we want to make sure that Singapore adopt responsible farming practices. Okay, we are responsible farmers here. And then their productions is sustainable in an urban setting. Okay, we live in a city, so we have to make sure that their best practices they adopt actually ensures that we have a very conducive environment. Yeah, and next, of course, the standard has to make it easier for them to meet the legal requirement. Okay, that's a SFA licensing requirement, and also elsewhere when they export their product. Okay, and in terms of catering to our consumers' needs, the product that we actually created, by certified farms, farms that adopt the GAP standards, they are actually considered as high quality. But what we want them to be deemed as is they are under a quality assured system So your product is actually a quality assured product for your customers, right? And your product is actually traceable because you can trace all the way back to the farm and you know what has been added into your produce. Okay, the kind of fertilizers, the kind of feed that you use to feed your fish, right? So that's very important to the consumers and to the market. And just now, our chairman mentioned that this is a certifiable standards, right? It is a voluntary adoption of the standard, but if you want to proceed to the next stage to be validated by a third-party certification body, you can do that by engaging a certification body to come in to validate the GAP system that you have put in place. So this particular standard, when you attain the certification, it is actually trustable because your buyer will know that it has been certified. Right? So the last objective that we want to attain is, as you know, the ASEAN, we do have an initiative trying to align the agri-food standards here. So it will help our farm to be very competitive or even able to compete with our imports that come from the region. It can also help the farms to reach out to the global market and enhance their export. Okay, so this is a summary of what I have covered in terms of the standards. So the 3 standards actually helps the farmers to make sure that their product is safe, high quality, fresh, and they are consistent and traceable, and they are responsibly being farm produced, okay, because we look at environmental and socially responsible sound practices that has been put in place. And of course, then the standard itself is considered as a quality assurance system that the farm can adopt. Okay, it can be audited by third party, and the standards will help the farms in terms of branding their products. Hopefully that will create a better market access for them. Last but not least is that we hope that Singapore product can not just cater to local market, they can be exported worldwide as well. Okay, on the right hand side again, then, your right hand side. Yeah, you look at that certification mark that we have created for the purpose of certification. SFA has initiated a certification scheme, right? We have actually allowed the certified farms to adopt the mark to identify their product and to convey this message, the value of the GAP certification to the consumers as well as to the buyers. Okay, I'd like to thank the list of experts that have gathered together to develop the 3 standards. Yeah, you may not really see them, but we do have the experts sitting around among you, right? And please get in touch with them. Okay, this is the last slide that I would like to do a bit of promotion. SFA has actually initiated the scheme, certifications for the farm that has adopted the 3 standards. You can actually get through the QR code that we have listed here to know more about the certification scheme. Okay, I would like to share that the standards is a journey for the farms. Okay, standard adoption, it does not stop here because GAP is now considered as a basic requirement by a lot of buyers. Okay, the farms have to put in place a good agriculture practice system. The next journey that they should embark on is towards sustainability. So in Singapore, we actually have developed a clean and green standard for urban farms that's geared towards ensuring farm sustainability, addressing resource resilience. Yeah, and we like to share that, GAP certified farm can move on to adopt another set of standards to get themselves certified and move on to get another stars. Okay, so that's all from me. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Khoo. Our next speaker is Mr. Allan Lim. Mr. Lim is the chairman and founder of Comcrop and Singapore's first rooftop farm producing leafy green vegetables for local supermarket. He will be sharing on SS675 Good Agriculture Practice. Mr. Lim, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Somehow my logo is black in color, but it's all right. My name is Allan. Happen to be a vegetable farmer, and I'm here to share with you this very exciting thing that we have just done. We have just launched the Comcrop's hybrid. The mic. Louder. Okay, can everybody hear me now? Great, okay. Yeah, so we started this hybrid rooftop farm a couple of weeks ago. And it's, I think by today, the largest rooftop farm in the whole of Singapore, targeting to produce almost 200 tons of leafy, fresh, green vegetable per year. The journey started quite a while ago in 2012. So what you see here in the photo, again, my logo is black in color. Okay. Well, that was testbed 1, right? A small greenhouse, smallish, about 6,000 square feet, about 4 years ago, where we actually built it and testbed it on the industrial rooftop. And based on that, we actually start to innovate and look at the difference in the constraint of growing vegetables in Singapore. We are a very unique country whereby we are resource constrained, land constrained, and even manpower constrained. So to be able to grow something out of all these constraints naturally has its challenges. And we did a bit of test bedding for 2-3 years, and in 2020, with the support of SFA 30x30 grant, we finally decided to expand the farm. So we decided to continue the whole idea of exploiting marginalized land, such as rooftops and large-scale rooftops, right? But we have to consider the whole idea of what does this really mean. I've always tell visitors to our farm that what we grow is vegetables. It is not something really extraordinary. It is vegetables. It is good quality vegetables, highly nutritious, clean, pesticide-free. But ultimately, if you go out there and get a plate of wanton mee, that cai sim in that plate is the kind of vegetable that I grow, okay? Except it's a little bit better. So we really had to consider, given such constraint as an Asian society with our kind of dietary preference, what are the considerations, right? Being resource constrained means we really need to look at yield. But then we also need to look at yield in a much more logical sense. It's not just growing for growing sake. It's actually growing what we can sell. What kind of variety actually works? I dare say that in this room and probably in this hall, we eat more chai sim than we eat kale, right? That's inevitable. So selection of variety then comes with some of these other constraints in the technology that we needed to employ. The second key thing is really about this idea of crop protection. And this is also a part of a sort of a change that we are pioneering in the standards as well. That we are no longer going to consider pests as an absolute no-no in farm. I think the whole idea of changing the mindset from pest management to crop protection is something really, really relevant today, in GAP standards. Protecting the crop is a much higher priority than killing and going nuclear to all the insects that you find and deploying pesticides. So mindset change that comes with the GAP is really, really important. But what does it really translate to in crop protection is that somewhere down the line, consumers will be a lot more assured that the farmers have done all its best to actually protect the crop from pests. And the ability to do that comes with somewhat transparency, and they are actually abiding by the standards, and things are properly traceable. And then we have manpower requirements, energy consumptions, packing and logistics. These are very common to every farmer that is, even Malcolm would also have these issues, right? So these are, the bottom trees are more common around the rest of the farms. Okay, this is a video. So I'm going to press this and I hope it works. Yeah. Okay, this is a drone shot of the new farm. Essentially, you realize it's curved. It's not fancy. It's because the building is curved. And to maximize yield, we actually have to select technologies, structures, lightweight enough to be on the rooftop, and yet allowing us to separate out the entire rooftop into 3 or 4 different sections. And we have to operationalize the individual sections. And yeah, if you're actually walking around the farm for a month, you start to feel that your left leg is a lot more stronger than your right because you keep turning left. Yeah, well, it's a fact. But essentially what you're seeing is, you can actually see in the front that is greenhouse 1, which is the test bed greenhouse. And from what we have learned in those test bedding experience, the subsequent greenhouse were actually built. And you'll notice that we actually have a much bigger height and also longer, actually wider greenhouses than actually greenhouse 1. This is greenhouse 1 that you're seeing on the screen. Now, building the next gen hybrid farm is a fancy name we gave to it because it's a hybrid farm which actually has some kind of additional lighting to enhance the growth. But the selection of greenhouse on a rooftop, right, actually helps us solve a pertinent problem of developing somewhat energy efficiency, because we could still harness the abundance in solar energy and then use light as a way to augment it, right? So the key consideration that we were looking at, and we cross-reference this with the standards, right, the GAP standards, really lies with the idea of where we are sourcing our inputs, the nutrients, the seeds, and where does all this thing comes from, and how do we properly record them, how do we store them and trace them. That forms the design basis to every other operations that we do. The ability for us to access good inputs actually determine for a big part what is our output. With better seeds and better growing and better management, you get better crop. Simply that, right? The equation is pretty simple. Harder to execute, but the logic is there. The higher cost of energy and water is prevalent in Singapore. So if I'm sharing this with another fellow Singapore leafy vegetable farmer, we all nod our head and shake our head and say, yeah, this is the problem. But compared to the region, we probably are really on the top 15% of the cost curve. And we have to figure a way to address this. The cost of energy is not going to go away with the current disruptions globally and the energy crisis. But then if we have to grow, and with this constraint, surely we still have to rely on energy efficiency and try to save as much as we can, because every bit that we save in the whole value chain actually amounts to a lot. And I mean the whole value chain from seed to packaging, and from packaging all the way to supermarket. There's no traditional source of manpower. There were very little manpower that we could actually directly take as farmers or agronomists. That was really about 2-3 years ago. Now things have changed. There's the Republic Poly and a few other institutions has started to train up manpower for us. But we also needed to implement systems that allow us to work properly. And by that, we actually got more technicians from the IT, from F&B, from other places to come in to work for us. And while they're not good at growing, they're actually good at engineering, and they're good at processing and process development. So process engineering, sorry. So these are the kind of constraints that we kind of feel, and some of them we turn into advantage as well. I touched a bit on the idea of variety. I cannot stress variety enough. To be able to grow more and grow better, you need to grow more differently. You need to bring more different chai sim to the market so that consumers continues to be excited about your product. And this is commercial. But if you are actually not designing to a certain specification and you don't operate your farm in a proper manner, you cannot achieve a greenhouse where there are 4 or 5 varieties of plants. And you cannot even achieve forecasting with your buyer and says, oh, Christmas is coming, we need more lettuce. How do we plan that in? Because if your systems are not in place and your processes are still somewhat not standardized, then you would have problems. So pre-harvest stage, growing safely, I talk about it, productivity and productively and clean. We hold this we hold these 3 conditions cardinally, because I think that forms the basis. And to hold this cardinally, we need some kind of guidebook, guidance, and that's where the GAP came in. We look carefully at those, guidelines, and we actually look at how we adapt and implement them. There's a good part to where we are looking and how we are able to access and look at data. Because of the data we collect on a large scale basis, we are now able to look at what are the things that we've done well, what are the things that we don't do well, and what are the things that we may need to improve. But more importantly, we have now got data that we can cross-check with the specifications, with GAP. And that helps us a lot, and eventually we set ourselves up to be audited. Because when auditors come in, then the straight away thing is, where is your data? Then I will tell them, oh, this is a Google link, right? And I think these are very important as we develop our farm. And implementing sensors right after you build a farm is not as easy as really planning all this data collection, data sets as you build it, because a lot of sensors will have been done. The wires and linings could have also been done. Controls of energy inputs is important. Again, crop protection through active monitoring. I think in JP there's a lot being talked about shaping how we deal with pests, or how we deal with the health of the plant. And taking that as reference, I think we are trying to do a good job in identifying these issues, isolating them, and accepting that not all the plants we grow will be perfect. I think those are good outcomes. So equipment maintenance and sanitations, operational aspects of this continues to be an issue, continues to be challenges that we have to overcome. And in the urban setting, somewhat it seems easier because we have access to a lot of, and perhaps being in Singapore is a lot easier because by nature, Singapore is quite clean and hygienic, and things are a lot more orderly. Okay, so achieving operational excellence, right? We converted one of our meeting rooms into monitoring rooms, and we have sensors, and you look at plants every day. It's really boring if you sit in there because those guys are not really moving, but day after day, you take snapshots, you see things growing. But more importantly, you're able to address and track data. You collect data and you address and track issues as it happens and as it goes along, right? At the bottom, you can see that it's actually at the night, and we actually turn on the light. We don't turn on the light all the time. It's really, really expensive. And mind you, we sell chai sim. So basically, when we needed to make a decision to enhance those growing, the decision is not based on whether we liked it or not. It's data-based, and it's a decision that we don't take lightly, because every time we turn on the lights, the cost of the plant increase, the cost of the vegetables increase. This is a video of how it looks like. And basically, as you go along, you can see that the lights are actually doing enhancement to the plant. This is a movable gully system, which means that on a daily basis, the rows of growing pipes actually jump forward, one or two pipes on a daily basis, and it gets pushed forward and forward and forward. Right? The light continues to be an enhancer of growth. It will not, in our case, not be the main source of light for photosynthesis. So post-harvest, I guess these are simple, these are common logics as well. Efficient and quick same-day delivery, that's what we can do. And I think if you are part of the standards, these are really good champion ideas to do. Traceability of the product. If you actually go to the supermarket and buy a packet of Comcrop vegetable, turn around and you actually see a batch number. The batch number correctly identifies the day, time of harvest, and the batch itself, and what is the growing recipe, and actually when the seed was planted. I don't think that there are any other farm right now or other products that's being imported that actually offer such traceability. And we do this because we believe that in some point in time, GAP would be relevant, and these are traceabilities that we could continue to provide and give assurance. Now, last slide. After all these things, right, why do we do this? We do this not because we want a star. In fact, we want a star, but we want 3 stars. But if you look at the supermarket shelf and you look at all the supermarkets that you go to, it is very, very difficult to win the hearts and minds of your consumer. because it is a buffet and a plethora of vegetables, each one looking as good as the other. How do you differentiate? How do we continue to... I can go to the supermarket and stand there and say, hey, hello auntie, I'm good, you know. But without proper systems, without putting in the right investment and the effort, and being recognized for those, it is hard to differentiate yourself in the market. And again, I come back to the first statement. We sell the same kind of vegetable that you see on your plate wanton mee, right? It's cleaner, it's pesticides free, it's probably more nutritious, and it's grown today because there is a set of guidelines that we adhere to, and that when you buy back that vegetable or you eat the wanton mee, or you go to the chicken nugget fund, you point at that vegetable, it gives you somewhat an assurance. And the more you do that, the more you recognize this as important, then the hearts and minds of consumers could be won someday. So that's essentially why we are motivated to do this, why we continue to do this, and why we encourage everyone to do this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. Our next speaker is Mr. Malcolm Ong. Mr. Ong is the CEO of the Fish Farmer Private Limited. He started his career as an IT engineer before transiting to be a fish farmer. He will be sharing on SS670, Good Aquaculture Practice. Mr. Ong, please.
Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you. Okay, and this morning, well, first of all, do take a photo because I'm never dressed like this. I'm always on the farm and we are dressed, you know, and so on and so forth. So I never dress like this except on my wedding day. So unfortunately today, when I left my home, we nearly got into a divorce because my wife was saying, hey, why do you dress so well? Huh? Yeah. So it's for you. All right. So today I want to talk about the fish farmer. So fish farmer owns farms all around Singapore on the northeast and the northwest of Singapore. All right. We are between Malaysia and Singapore. So those of you, when you're caught in the traffic jam, you can come and visit me, right? We are over there. Okay? This is a photo of our farm in Lim Chu Kang and our farm in Changi. So many of you ask me, hey, as an engineer, why is it that you decide to go into fish farming? Why from engineering go into fish farming? Well, there's a saying. The saying is, give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach him how to fish and teach him how to fish and he can avoid the wife for the whole weekend. All right? So this is one of the motivations, right? So if you want to come into fish farming, come and talk to me first. All right? We, you know, in Singapore, when you have a fire, you call 995. We have a 997 policy. 90% of our farm is water. Only 10% is fish. 90% of our energy is generated. We are not connected to the grid. And our farm uses very little energy. And 70% of our farm is made of recycled material. So we use very, very little resource. Yeah, 997. So GAP for aquaculture. All right. What is GAP for aquaculture? All right. This is the definition of GAP for aquaculture. All right. But let me try to distill it for you. GAP is a RA standard. What is RA? You know, you have a PG-13, you have a M18, and you have a RA, right? So GAP is RA. So GAP is responsible aquaculture. So when you see the logo, when you look at that logo, then you know that that company is doing responsible aquaculture, not anyhow how. All right? And that's what we do. We have to be responsible. And responsible for what? Okay? So for animal health, for food safety and traceability, environmental preservation, and worker welfare. So that is what GAP means to us. That we are responsible, not just to earn money, but to be responsible in the resources around us. Yeah. And the benefits of GAP, there are, I'm going to say 3 R's and 3 C's. Okay, 3 R's and 3 C's. So the 3 R's are rigor. It forces us to, because there's rigor, it forces us to do a lot of recording. And we get a lot of data. And with this data, it helps us to improve. And we then have to be accountable. So there's a responsibility. So that's the 3 R's. And the 3 C's are, for the consumer, they are more confident. And they know that we care for the environment. We care for the worker health and fish health. And also, we are concerned. We are concerned about the sustainability. We are concerned about low carbon footprint. And so these are what it means to the consumer. All right? And when you want to go overseas, right, it's important to have standards. And GAP helps us so that it gives us a leg up when we want to go overseas. So what we do? We do all the recording. And then after that, we put it into a Google Sheet. There's a dashboard, and then we do some forecasts. So I'll just walk you through a little bit, show you a bit of photos. So it's really, really disciplined, right? So we got to do all the recording. All right, you can see here we do periodic checks on the fish, check and see whether there's any problems. All right, and the consumer now, instead of just only one big fish, now we also have various forms of fish, all the ready to cook, ready to eat type. Yeah, this is a little bit about our farm. And once you collect all this data, then you have to make it digestible. So we put it into a dashboard. It helps us to do the forecasting of the harvest so that we know, hey, what is coming up, and then we can then adjust, because we have to maybe talk to the restaurants or talk to the talk to the retailers. Maybe we'll do an offer and so on and so forth. And what we are tracking actually is the mortality and the feeding behavior, because that gives us an idea of the health of the fish. Yeah? All right. So we have some statistics that we have to do. We look for the feeding. And of course, we also track if the feeding behavior, if the feeding goes down, something is wrong, right? The fish can't tell you, but the fish can show you that something is wrong. And that then helps us to then do some mitigation measures. Yep. Okay, so you got all this recording. It's a lot of work. In fact, actually, you have to hire a team just to do this recording. And what we're trying to do is we're going to try to do it more automatic. So we're trying to go into automation. So one of the areas we're doing is in artificial intelligence, using cameras, using more cameras. We try to be, for us, we try to be less invasive. Try not to do something that is not natural to the fish. So you must do something that's less invasive. All right? So this shows you a bit of how the AI works. It's actually counting the fish. The video is on the left, and you can see the counting. And then here, we're doing another experiment. You see here, the fish is swimming across, and we're counting the fish. So we try not to do something that is too, doesn't disturb the fish too much. Yeah. So what does the market want? Well, the market wants GAP and more. Okay, they want us to care for the earth, wants it to be sustainably farmed and available all year round. And now, Singaporeans have no time to cook. No time. So I'm trying to help the government because, our families now all very small, no children, right? Because they no time to cook. So what we do is we try to make it easy for them. Yeah. So here we go. This is Singapore fish Japanese recipe. I tell you, so good. Quickly go to Don Don Donki after this. Okay. You know where to go? It's nearby only. Don Don Donki at Suntec City. All right. Really good and cook in 8 minutes. Cannot be better than that. All right. Just a Japanese recipe, Singapore fish. Why? Because young people like Japanese food. Yeah. So we're not addressing people like me, white hair people. We're addressing the next generation of people. So you cannot just give them a fish. I used to give fish to my friends. Then I get less and less friends because they don't know what to do with the fish, right? But you give them this, then you get more and more friends, all right? And we've just launched this week. Go to FairPrice, our Heat and Eat range. Literally, you put it into a hot water in 8 or 10 minutes. It's done. Literally, don't even need to wash the pot. The hot water can be used for washing, right? You don't even need to wash the pot. It's so simple. Yeah, Heat and Eat range, Teochew style, Thai style, mala flavor, and etc. etc. All right. So, what is the fish farmer about? Fish farmer is about the taste, because it's grown in free range. It's a seawater farm, so it's not on the land. All right. Variety, freshness, sustainability, health and safety, socially, environmentally responsible, and GAP certified. Yeah. So that's what we're about. All right, I'll just take you through some photos of our farm and of our products. Sorry, yeah, this is and if you look at the newspaper tomorrow, you see another news about FairPrice supporting local. So this week there is a Made in Singapore fair, and go to FairPrice to get your local fish. All right, some of the work that we do, some of the news articles that we're featured in. Yep. So just to give you a little bit of a snapshot. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Ong. Our next speaker is Mr. Yeap Ming. Mr. Yeap is the QA lead for Choose Agriculture Pte Ltd. He will be sharing on the SS676 Good Animal Husbandry Practices for Layer Farms. Mr. Yeap, please.
So good evening, everyone. I am Ming from Choose Agriculture. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Standards Development Organization, SDO, for inviting me to join this event. It is my great honor to be here today. The topic I would like to share today is production of freshly laid, high-quality eggs with Singapore Standard 676 Good Animal Husbandry Practice for Layer Farm. This is the agenda of my sharing today. I will start with a short introduction about Choose Agriculture, followed by the challenges we face along our journey, the benefits we gain after adopting the standards, and lastly, some advice for those who wish to adopt the standards. So without further ado, let's start our sharing today. Choose Agriculture is one of the local egg farms in Singapore. We have been producing chicken eggs for the market for the past 35 years, and all our eggs are produced at our 20-hectare farm. Our current production capacity is about 800,000 eggs per day, and we are targeting to increase our productions to 1 million eggs per day in next year in order to support Singapore 30 by 30 mission. Choose Agriculture grew from a humble beginning in 1987 as a breeder farm. After that, we evolved to become a layer farming, and in 1999, Singapore Quality Egg Scheme (SQES) was first introduced by Singapore Food Agency, and we are very proud to be able to become one of the members of this scheme. 1 year later, in year 2000, we launched our first designer eggs to the Singapore market. Throughout this year, we are constantly growing to become a high-tech and eco-conscious farm. For example, we develop egg washing and sanitizing technology, liquid egg processing technology, biogas technology, cage-free egg farming system. And also, in 2021, we achieved another milestone by relocating to our brand new farm facility. In early of this year, we are also very proud to be able to awarded with GAP certification. Throughout this year, we have also achieved a series of certifications, for example, HALA, Food Safety Management System, Business Continuity Management System, GAP standards, and also Humane Farm Animal Care for our cage-free egg production system. We have also been awarded with Small Medium Enterprise Fast Moving Companies Award and also Singapore Brands Award. Egg is not just an egg. I believe that majority of people will perceive the egg as a source of protein nutrients. But do you know that it can actually provide even more beyond the protein? Choose Agriculture is one of the pioneers of introducing designer eggs to the Singapore markets. For example, we have cordyceps eggs, sakura eggs, fresh eggs with vitamin E, omega-6, omega-3, and organic selenium eggs. Apart from that, we are also the only cage-free egg producer in Singapore. In cage-free farming system, all the birds can express their natural behavior. For example, they have ample space to move around, can make dust buffing, lay their eggs in the nest box, and also perching. Next, I would like to share about some challenges we face along our journey. The first challenge is about the documentation aspect. In previous Singapore Quality Act Scheme, SQES, the standard is more simple as compared to the current GAP standard. For example, SQES is mainly focused on product quality and safety. However, for the GAP standard, in addition to the product quality and safety, it also covers animals' health and welfare, environment management, and also workers' health and safety. From here, we can see that there is a big difference between these two standards. So, when we perform the gap analysis, we found that there are some gaps in our current documentation system, and we have to put in more efforts in the documentation part in order to be certified. For example, we have to review and update our procedures by including the GAP requirements into our documentation system. The second challenge is about the employee motivations. I still remember that when we tell our employee we want to be GAP certified, there are two things that came across their mind. That is massive documentation and also losing the flexibility. Most of the employees worry that their burdens will be increased by having more records to be filled in, and also they have to follow SOP in their work, which will make them to spend more time to complete their jobs. So this poses some challenges for us to change the employee mindset about the GAP standard. In order to solve this challenge, we have to communicate with our employees to understand their difficulties and concerns, and also at the same time, we try to let them know the reason behind we want to be GAP certified and the potential benefits that we can gain after adopting the standards. Besides, additional cost is also needed when we want to adopt the GAP standard. For example, certification fee and also testing fee. In previous SQES, the authority will take the samples and send for the lab testing periodically. But now, we have to take on our own responsibility to take the sample and send for lab tests, and extra testing cost is incurred in this case. Although there are quite many challenges we face along our journey, we can feel that we enjoy quite a lot of benefits after adopting the GAP standard. The first benefit is about improvement of our productivity. By committing to the GAP standards, we are now having a consistent procedure and specification in place. This helps to streamline our operation practice, and all the employees can understand easily and save time in their area of work. Subsequently, this makes our operation to become more efficient and increase the productivity. Besides, we have also improved our data collections and record keeping system, which allow us to keep track on the data to identify the opportunity for improvement. The second benefit is to build customer trust on our products. Today, customers are becoming more sophisticated and more aware of where their foods are coming from. For example, they are interested to know if we are following the proper farming practice, and also how we ensure that the animal welfare is not compromised during the operations. By having GAP certifications, we can demonstrate to our customers that our farming practice is complying with the GAP standard, and therefore inspire their confidence on our products. The third benefit is to stay competitive in the market. There's always a challenge and pressure from the consumers to ask the farmer to produce safe and quality products in a responsible way. We couldn't know that if more consumers would only take on the products they supply from a GAP certified farmers in one day. So by committing to the GAP standard, this helps us to prepare earlier, keep us stay ahead, and even gain access to the new market. And lastly, I would like to share about some advice on the steps to achieve the GAP certifications. Before we start our certification process, the first step is to study the standard first. From here, you can understand and familiar with the scope and also set of requirements of the standards. After that, we can form a team that consists of process owners from different departments to perform a gap analysis. The team will need to review the company operations and procedure to identify the potential gaps. From here, we will also roughly know the additional resources we might need along the journey. For example, the consultation service from the expert and also the additional manpower. After all the gaps have been identified, then we can proceed and arrange for the certification process. And once you are certified, the next thing we need to do is to maintain our system and seek for the continual improvement. For example, we can provide training to our staff so that they are aware of the procedures and doing the right job in their area of work. Besides, we also need to perform internal audit at least once per year in order to verify that all the system is in a good order. That's all from me. I hope all of you will enjoy my sharing today. Thank you.
So the moderator is Dr. Diana Chan, who is seated at your far left. Dr. Chan is the co-chair of the Technical Committee for Agri-Tech and Agri-Food Production. She is also the Deputy Director for the Aquaculture Innovation Center. So dear audience, if you have any question to raise, please feel free to raise your hand and the staff will pass you a mic. So over to you, Dr. Chan.
Okay. Hi everyone, and thank you very much for actually coming to the event. Also thank you Chongman for the introduction, and also would like to actually say thank you to the colleagues of SDO, Standards Development Organization, for actually launching this standards event today. So I'm Diana. I'm actually your moderator for the panel's discussion today. And I'm actually from the Aquaculture Innovation Center that's set up by Enterprise Singapore in 2019 to actually serve the needs of the local aquaculture industry. But I'm also in the technical committee for Agri-Tech and Agri-Food production under the Food Standards Committee, and I have been working as co-convener together with Ms. Khoo from SFA in developing standards together with input from the industry. So I think there's one common question that is often asked, that why do we have standards? Now, you know that Singapore is not an agricultural or aquaculture country, but we have many farms. We have vegetable farms, both indoor and outdoor. We have 110 licensed coastal fish farms, as well as urban fish farms, right? So there are actually a lot going on, but each farm has got its own operating practices, right? Aquaculture, agriculture practices, so they're all pretty different, and as such, the productivity yield also differs. But you know that recently there's been so much emphasis on producing enough, right, to meet the 30 by 30 goal, to ensure that the local farms are able to produce enough to meet at least 30% of total nutritional needs, right? In just around the corner, it is about 2030. So there's really a need to actually ensure that there's a food supply resilience and also food security. But to begin with, the fundamentals must be actually made known, or the farms themselves must be made aware that they are responsible on good agricultural and aquaculture practices that they can take note of, so as to ensure sustainable production and also to bear in mind the food quality, the produce quality, as well as food safety. So like what our colleague panelist Ms. Khoo has actually mentioned is that the standards actually align, they're developed in alignment to the ASEAN and international standards. So we having this certification in mind, right? When you have that certification for your farm, it is actually bringing you to the next level of recognition for commitment to the farming practices so that you can actually ensure sustainable production, but also the quality is assured, right? So without further ado, I think we've actually heard from the panels of speakers about the different certifications, the standards that are available, the journey from the three esteemed farms, that in their process of actually preparing for farm certification, in adopting the standards, and the challenges and the benefits that they can actually reap out of that for their farming production. Right. So before that, I think we've actually done a very quick poll, and there are 3 questions. So we look at the responses, okay, just to get the ball rolling. I think the first question was actually, which sector are you from? So we have a lot actually from the none of the above. So yeah, mostly not from the agriculture or the aquaculture or the egg production farm, but yeah, from other sectors. And this is good. I mean, it's good that you're actually spending time to know about the certification and the standards. So for the agriculture sector, it's not just about farming fish or growing vegetables or producing eggs, but we need a lot of technology, right? Supporting technology that could help enhance the farming production, especially with the 30 by 30 goal, right? There's actually a need to ramp up production. So we need innovation, we need technology adoption. So for those who are actually in that last category, who are actually not from any of the farming sectors, it's good, right? I mean, we do have people coming from lighting technology for vegetable farm production. We do have people coming from water technology, wastewater treatment. So all these are very important supporting technologies for actually enhancing farming production. So I think if you have actually any questions regarding this today's session on the certification or the standards, please feel free, afterwards when you open to the floor for questions, please feel free to ask questions, okay, about how to go about maybe perhaps implementation of these practices, the standards for certification, and what are the key considerations that one must have before getting onto adopting these standards. So these are some of the questions that you can have, especially really looking forward to questions from those in a non-agricultural or aquaculture sector. Okay, for the next question is actually about your interest in actually wanting to implement. Okay, the last one is do not intend to use any. Perhaps I think we take it positively. I mean, we have a lot, right, who are not from the farming sectors, but they are here, right? And for this question, it's sort of like related to that kind of response because perhaps you do not know enough, or maybe the awareness of this usefulness of knowing the standards is not there, it's not enough. So I think perhaps you can take this session, and learn a little bit more about what these standards actually mean, how they can actually help to the farm in their production, right? Farming practices, and so on and so forth. And then it may change your mind, right? Okay, now the last question is, which of these are the reasons for your company to plan to implement these agri-food standards? It's quite related to the other two, right? Especially when you have the majority of the audience actually is not from the farming sector, but we do have those in the audience who is actually interested, right, to actually know more about the standards, like for the second question. So it is actually a opportunity for you all to actually ask questions. Now perhaps I can actually throw maybe one of the questions to the panel, Ms. Khoo. What would be, how does one actually get on board in wanting to do farm certification and learning about the standards for the respective sector?
Yeah, I think just now, Choose Farm, I think the presenter has shared, how to get yourself going as a farm, right? But I think it's very much to interpret what are the requirements within the standards. So SFA, other than initiating the development of the standard, we also have worked with our polytechnics to develop training courses on these standards. So you can actually start off by sending your farm's personnel to attend the training course on the 3 different SS standards. So we have actually collaborated with the Temasek Poly, AIC, Agriculture Innovation Center, to implement a training course on SS670. So if you are interested to implement the specification of good aquaculture practice standards, you can actually check on their website to find out the respective training dates and send your farm's personnel there to start learning what are the requirements you need to put in place. We have also collaborated with Republic Polytechnics. They are helping us to train on SS675, which is a specification for good agriculture practices. That's for the agriculture sectors. So you can actually send your farm personnel there for attending the training to understand what are the specifications. Right? I think it's very much important to start off to let your farm personnel understand, what are the requirements and how do you put in place in your operation. That's the very first step. Yeah, knowing what exactly are the requirements. And then I think when you're ready with your knowledge, I think you can go back to your operations to look at how you put in place all the requirements as just now you see. I have a slides that, maybe list down the key aspect where you have to start off developing your key documentation. I think that's a challenge a lot of farms are facing, how to start off writing your SOPs and doing the record keeping. Yeah. And also reviewing whether your operational flow is actually right, technically sound. The other, I think, important parts is really you have to start off doing an internal audit checks, by knowing whether your system is right before you embark on the certification journey, because certification is costly. Once you start off the certification and when you happen to have non-conformant, you have to put in a lot of time and resources to rectify. That's a waste of internal resources. So it's best to start off the internal audit checks. Yeah. So that's the key aspect you have to follow. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ms. Khoo. So if you want actually a little bit more information about the training, courses that are available, now feel free to actually approach there's actually both RRP, Republic Polytechnic, who's actually running these standard course, right, on agricultural practices. But we also have the Aquaculture Innovation Center, which is the booth just behind us. It's Earth E36, that is also able to actually share with you what is actually being taught or covered in those training courses. Okay, so the training days are available. So if you want to have more information about these training courses, please refer to the respective website. Especially, at least I know because AIC runs the standards for the good aquaculture practices. So we're actually having the first run, the intake in December. So it's sometime it's 14 to 16 December, if I'm not wrong. So please do feel free to actually look it up and then to find more information. Or if you want to have questions asked, do feel free to approach us, right? To actually, like what Hoon mentioned, the standards actually covered, right? The farm needs to know what is actually lacking. So there needs to be a need analysis. It's like what Mr. Yeap had mentioned about from the egg production farm perspective, right? So you need to know what is lacking, what is the gap analysis, right? And from there, you'll be able to plan better as to what sort of training to actually go into, what are the things that you need to prepare in order to actually enhance this smooth transition from your current farming practices to something that is really responsible farming practices, right? Because there's going to be quite a fair bit of documentation as well. So that is actually part of the training, that is help to transit, to good farming practices, responsible farming practices, before you actually go on to apply for your certification. Okay, so I think if I can actually ask questions to the panel, who are actually all very well esteemed, farm operators, generating that. I know Mr. Yeap has actually mentioned some key considerations, right, that you need to actually look at when trying to adopt the standards and in preparation of farm certification. Perhaps we can hear from Mr. Malcolm Ong and Mr. Allan Lim, on the vegetable production side as well as the fish production side.
Can you hear me? All right. Okay, so key consideration. First of all, whether you have a standard or not, when you run a farm, you better have a standard, right? No matter what, okay? It's just that this requires you to be very meticulous in documenting it, yeah? So when we ran the farm, we had to have standards. We have to have procedures. Okay, what do you do when the fries come in? How do you take care of them? How often do you feed? And how do you harvest and pack the fish and so on and so forth? It's just that this goes one more step. So it's not enough to say that your fish is good. You have to prove that your fish is good. So it's not enough. If Malcolm Ong says fish is good, not enough. You need to prove it. And to prove it, you need all your data, you need all your thing. And this certification or this standard helps us to do that. Helps us to do that not only just to the consumers, but also if you want to export your fish.
Right, so it's the same thing, right? Whether you grow vegetable, grow fish, eggs, and many other things, assurance is the number one thing. And assurance through standard is actually the most expedient way of reaching the market, right? There's another thing that I don't talk about, and I don't think we talk about in this, is some perception is that the implementation of the standards is very costly, and it adds cost to the end product. I would say that we are really neutral at this right now. There's a lot of cost in adapting the standards, in understanding the standards and implementing those. But then that is not something that cannot be overcome. But the long tail of benefits is what it's also intangible, right? Because assurance, how do you quantify that? I don't know, right? People's confidence in your product, it's a brand value. So from that angle, the consideration tips. I just also want to address just now the polling. 50% of the people here are ancillary and friends of the farm, right? And then the other 50%, when you actually look at the micro questions, you are really quite split equally amongst the need to brand, have the value, also operate efficiently and all those. And I just want to say that these are the exact consideration that we have as well. We are not going to adopt standards in our aspect, right? Just because there's one aspect of it. But the beauty of adopting a standard is that it actually covers evenly the various aspects of what we face as challenges, and in a moderate manner. Does not allow us to, or doesn't really require us to go overboard on certain, say for example, crop protection or stuff like that. But if we actually look at the standard, right, it is actually a very even-handed way of implementing some kind of specification so that we could grow properly and smoothly. I think those are things that are very intrinsic that we don't really talk about as we start to implement.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Mr. Lim and Mr. Ong. I guess we can actually take a few questions from the floor, from the audience. Would they? Okay.
Sorry, I'm Rahman calling from Topan Lifang. We are managing the sales of the standard. But what I'd like to ask, in order to obtain the GAP certification, who do we engage the certification body and where can we find them?
Yeah, from what I understand, currently in Singapore, there are a couple of certification bodies. They can actually look at auditing your farm based on the standards. I'm not sure whether they are all here, but I know that there's one Reference International Certification Body. They have raised their hand. They are familiar with the standards and they can provide such audit service. In Singapore, there's also a control union. Yeah, they are also able to conduct farm audit and certification on the standards. There's also another certification body that we are aware of, that's Socotec. Yeah, so potentially there are quite a couple of certification bodies in Singapore here that you can approach to for certifications. Yeah.
Yeah. Next
Hi,
question.
Raymond here. I'm from Microcell, and I'm in the future agri, so in the biotech agri side. Could you please, this question is more for Hoon, but also for other panelists because you actually run the farms. Could you elaborate more on how do these standards take into account the cross-sector industry needs in terms of infrastructure? For example, the Lim Chu Kang redevelopment master plan. And examples are there's currently no gravity-fed water for high-rise farming, for example, in aquaculture, and also perhaps no real guidelines in terms of roof weight loading for your rooftop hydroponics, for example. And these would involve other agencies such as BCA, PUB, etc. So could you elaborate on how standards or future standards might take this into account?
Yeah, I think there are other guidelines that are available. You know, if you look at the application in agriculture and the new developments in Singapore, I think our standards actually focus on production process. Yeah, but what you are talking about could be infrastructure setup, you know. So in Singapore, we do have industry guidelines. I think SFA has also developed some guidelines for infrastructure setup of aquaculture farms. Yeah, so in terms of some of these new areas, if it is not adequate, in future we will look into developing new guidelines to address that needs. Yeah. Yeah. So I think for us, in terms of Singapore standards, if we see the need, I think we will look into adding into or revising our standard to address the needs of the industry.
I just want to share this. I'm also selling the koyo that I create because I was in the standards committee. And one of those things that we debated about very hotly and we went to and fro and we re-examined again and again is the whole idea of controlling pests. Now, if you are looking at where we operate, Comcrop is 400 meters away from the nearest housing estate. And we are, I think, 250 meters away from the nearest playground. What is this implication? Is that if we were to look at developing a pest control method that actually do not have any way of controlling what we do, or regulating what we do, or being transparent on what we do, then that becomes a problem. So the fundamental shift during those discussions was we have to really discard the idea that there is a need to kill and go nuclear on all the pests on our farm, but to change into holistically looking how to protect our crop. So if you look at the subtle changes, it's really not about the roof loading and all those, because BCA would have guidelines and our engineers actually design for it. But the more intrinsic part is really how does operating a farm in the urban environment really impact the community that we're supposed to sell our vegetables to. And those are intrinsically weaved into the standards because, number one, we have to be somewhat really transparent about what we do. We have to have traceability on the inputs that we have. We also need to keep records to the process itself. Some of these records are developed in numbers. It manifests itself in long strings of data and Excel sheet. But nobody really can understand this until we crunch it. But when you really need to crunch it, right, you'll find answers. And with those answers, you are able to then improve. So I dare say that there are some of this already being inputted in the urban farming with the standards. There are others that we don't have. And I think those really requires the challenges to emerge as the city evolve, more building codes are evolving, more communities are being involved, and then the standards will probably have to evolve.
Okay, thank you very much for all the questions from the floor. We have just one last question. Then we can take one last question from the floor. Is there anyone? Yes?
Hi, my name is Vaishak. I think both Mr. Malcolm and Mr. Lim mentioned that energy, so how to manage energy was very key. I think Mr. Malcolm uses 90% of solar cells, and Mr. Lim mentioned that in the night time it might be harder to get the energy required. So going forward, are we going to see more standards on how to integrate energy, in terms of renewables, into the agri-tech system?
Yeah, actually, other than the 3 standards that are launched today, the TC committee actually is looking into the clean and green standards. Clean and green urban farms, for aquaculture, clean and green urban farms for agriculture. So that will take into consideration the energy efficiency, the waste management, the resource management utilization. So that will be actually weaved into the good practices, farming practices. So that there is actually the clean and green urban farms standards actually that's going to be launched. When's
Yeah, maybe I think it's a timely questions for us. In the clean and green standard, we actually set performance indicators and performance levels, which is a very good reference for the farm to follow to make sure that your operations is really efficient. Yeah, you perhaps want to get a copy of the publication. Last year, we have actually launched a publication, Clean and Green Standards for Agriculture Farms. It's already available. The one on clean and green standards for aquaculture farm, we actually have it published already. It's available from the Singapore Standard eShop, but we will actually have a launch coming month. Yeah, so those are very good standards that you can start referring to address the energy efficiency part. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you, moderator, and our esteemed speakers for the engaging session. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the session. It is our privilege to have your presence at this event. So, on behalf of the Singapore Standards Council and the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, Standards Development Organization, thank you for attending, and we wish you a pleasant week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.